Hey, welcome back. This is lesson 2. So in this lesson, I will begin to describe those 4 general aspects of how I do a Bible study, the ones that I mentioned in that first video. Understanding the historical and cultural context, understanding the literary context, making observations, and drawing application. So here's another tip. Always pray before studying. Any opportunity to study the Bible can become a springboard for conversations with God. So ask Him for fresh insight to make the Scripture come alive. I don't think there's any better feeling than to experience Him speaking to you through His Word. Okay, so in this video, we're just going to tackle the first thing, historical and cultural context. This is the setting of the Scriptures, okay? So when I have a Scripture text that I want to study, my first step is to ask a series of questions about the book as a whole, like who's the author, who's the audience, when was the book written, why was it written, what was the purpose and theme of the book, okay? Now, this particular step is my favorite of all of them, I think, because I love learning about the historical and cultural context. I think it's absolutely fascinating. So in this step, what you get to do is journey back in time so that you can understand the culture that the Bible was lived and given, okay? Another tip, before you do anything else, keep in your mind that the culture that the Bible was set in is an ancient one. The ancient Near East was a culture that was very different from our own. Now, our tendency is to read our own culture, read our own 21st century Western modern culture into a Bible passage. We all do that, unless we consciously try not to. So when you put the Bible back in its ancient context, this really helps to give a more clear interpretation of that passage of Scripture. What did it mean to the ones that it was written to? The Bible was not written to us, moderns, but it was written for us. Okay? Now, keep in mind that the biblical writers, they took it for granted that their audiences shared their language and their culture. So you're not going to have them explaining some of their terms. So what that means for us who don't live with these terms anymore, we have to kind of dig in to get that original meaning. Good news is there are advances in archaeology in the last 50 to 100 years that has given us some really great cultural insights into those ancient times that the Bible was in. And we're learning more all the time. One of my favorite resources, and I'll just show it to you right now, this is in a New King James Version. You probably could get it in other versions, I'm not sure. The Cultural Background Study Bible. So it's, scriptures, and then there's a little commentary down at the bottom that kind of looks at it from an archaeological or cultural standpoint. And it gives some fascinating insight. So the thing is that our own cultural insights are on autopilot. We don't have to put in a whole lot of effort to read our own beliefs into a passage of Scripture. What we need to learn to do, though, is to ask a basic question when we come across a Scripture. What did the ancients think about this? When we come across a word, what did they think that it meant? And if we know nothing of the ancient world, we're more likely to impose our own culture and worldview on the text. And this is always going to impede our understanding. This is something we all do. We all start out just assuming that the ancients of Bible times, that they thought pretty much like we do. I have been shocked so many times to learn just how different we are. Digging into the culture, the ancient culture, the good, the bad, some really interesting things have happened for me. I've been able to see how extraordinary God is, how he comes to the rescue, bringing his culture, Torah, into those tainted ones of man. And it helps me to become more in awe of him and his steadfast love that he's shown us throughout the ages. So, remember those questions earlier? Those who, what, when, where, how questions? When you're looking at cultural context, these are the kinds of questions that will serve you best. Who is the author? Or what is the subject of this passage? And what's known about either the author or what's known about this subject? Who's the audience? What's going on in their immediate life? What's going on with the nations around them? When and where is this time period? What issues were common at the time? What was going on politically, economically, culturally, religiously? And then, why was this written? Another resource that I really like is this one, Ancient Near East Thought in the Old Testament. That's got some fascinating tidbits of information. Ancient Near East Themes in Biblical Theology. Another one, Dictionary of Daily Life. And I'm going to show you the spine of this. It's the IVP Bible Background Commentary. This one is the Old Testament. There's one for New Testament. So another aspect of cultural context has to do with language, right? So at times the Bible can be difficult to understand because it's written in different languages than what you and I speak as our primary language. And if you've ever tried to learn another language, you know that there's not always going to be a one-to-one relationship between the word in one language and a word in the other. A word in one language might have a variety of meanings expressed by several different words in the other language. And this is the case with Hebrew. The Hebrew language has far fewer words than English. So what this means is one Hebrew word can have a variety of different meanings. Also, Hebrew is a concrete language, which means that it can be sensed by the five senses: hearing, sight, touch, smell, sound. And English is more of an abstract language. Now, the thing about translations is when the Bible translator sat down to translate the Bible into us, or for us into modern languages, they at times had to make their best guess. And sometimes their best guess was just a literal meaning. Well, sometimes literal meanings don't translate properly into another language. Idioms are a great example of this. One of my favorite American idioms is keep your eye on the road. That means pay attention. But if you were to look at it, think about it literally, keeping your eyeball on the road, how would you, like if you didn't know that was the meaning of it, how would you know what that meant? So if I were to take literally those words, keep your eye on the road, translate that into another language, they wouldn't understand. They'd have no way of knowing that it means pay attention. So here's another tip. When you're reading scripture, ask yourself when you come across something, might this be an idiom? Should I take it literally, or is there something else going on? Let me give you an example in scripture. This is from Genesis 25:27. Talk about Esau and Jacob. The boys grew up, and Esau became a man knowing how to hunt, a man of the field, while Jacob was a complete man dwelling in tents. Okay, now if you're reading along here, you might think that the phrase dwelling in tents means just what it says, literally, right? And yes, that's true, but dwelling intense is also an idiom for learning Torah. So when you come across a passage of scripture, don't just stop at the plain meaning. Ask, could this be an idiom? What might the ancients have thought about this? Could this have a deeper meaning than just the plain reading? I absolutely love Hebrew idioms, and I actually have a video course on them if you're interested in learning more about that. Just go to the Rooted Cafe website in the store and you'll find the course. If you are a Rooted Cafe member, you get that course for free as part of your monthly paid membership. So, is the Bible easy to understand or is it difficult to understand? Yes, it's both. When one word can mean several things and we have to determine which meaning the author intended, that can be a little tricky. The Rooted Cafe has a free course called the Blue Letter Bible for Not So Dummies. I think that's the name of it. And I recommend, if you have not watched that, I recommend you do that because it'll help you get started on some word studies. So getting a handle on the cultural background, that's one of those times when I think you can rely on what other people have already looked into for us, digging into those ancient cultures. So those resources that I shared with you would be some, I think, great first starts in digging into the culture. So in our next video, we're going to be talking about the literary context. And I'll see you there next time.